In an era where Radwood everything is all the rage, the Miura still stops the show virtually everywhere it goes. Why is this car so important? Why, as it approaches 55 years old, does it make people stop in their tracks? Or in one case, a woman come running down the street telling me she just made a bus driver stop mid-block so she could get off the bus because she'd seen a Miura. You have to start with the looks, of course, since that's most people's first interaction with the car. But like any great car, there's a lot more behind it. One of the most important things to know about the Miura is that it was a bit of an accident. Ferruccio Lamborghini famously started his car company after being slighted by Enzo Ferrari when the clutch of his 250 GTE failed. Lamborghini vowed he would make a better car, and he sort of did. His new company's first car was an elegant front-engined car with a quad-cam V12, 5-speed transmission, and independent suspension all-around, all things that the contemporary Ferraris lacked when Lamborghini's 350 GT appeared in 1963. Lamborghini hired the best people, including a number of talented and young ex-Ferrari folks who were weary of Enzo's imperious nature. The Miura first conceptually took shape not because Ferruccio requested it, but because these men were playing with the idea of what they wanted to make. They brought their initial proposal to Ferruccio, who gave the green light to develop it into a concept, which they did over the course of 7 feverish months, in time to display the chassis without bodywork at the Turin Motor Show in October of 1965. The car created an absolute sensation in Turin. Almost all of the men behind the Miura were between 25 and 30 years old, and it shows from how blindingly modern the spec was. The V12 engine was mounted transversely behind the occupants, paired with a 5-speed transaxle, which shared its lubrication with the engine. The chassis employed independent double wishbone suspension and disc brakes all round. While mid-engine supercars are standard fare nowadays, no such thing existed when the Miura appeared, and in fact Formula One had only switched from front to mid-engine cars 4 years earlier. Many people assumed the bare chassis on display was the basis for a race car, although Ferruccio famously forbade racing of his cars. At this point, the car was still not intended for production, although several people attempted to order a Miura, this without ever having seen the body because none had even been designed yet. The best designers approached Lamborghini, hoping that they might have a shot at doing the body for this exciting new car, and ultimately it was Bertoni that got the job, to be led by their recently hired chief designer, 27-year-old, of course, Marcello Gandini. Just 5 months later, in March of 1966, the first Miura with a body was shown at the Geneva Motor Show, having been driven there by Nuccio Bertoni himself from Italy, something that would be absolutely unthinkable for a new supercar reveal today. The already electrifying effect of the Miura was even more so once the spectacular bodywork was fitted. Ferrari also debuted a new car at the same show, the 330 GTC, but no one cared. The Miura was so far away from anything that anyone else was doing, and the public reaction undoubtedly gave Lamborghini the visibility they wanted, handily one-upping, if not three-upping Ferrari. Something that was all the more significant given the two companies' prior history, and all the more remarkable because Automobili Lamborghini was only 3 years old at the time. Orders poured in, and Ferruccio Lamborghini agreed that the Miura should be put in production. And all this before anyone even drove the car. In terms of experience and performance, the Miura delivered. Easily the fastest car in the world at the time, it also handled thanks to its sophisticated chassis. Although the hasty development makes it a car that requires a firm hand and plenty of experience to get the best out of. So what's a Miura like today? The first thing you notice about the Miura in person is its size. It's so beautifully proportioned that you don't really get a sense for how small the car is from photos. It's truly a packaging marvel. Somehow there's a V12 mounted between the cabin and rear wheels, and once you're inside you'll notice a wall of carburetors immediately behind you on the other side of the thermally insulated rear glass, literally inches from your ears. The other thing you'll notice inside is the atrocious driving position. The seat is not adjustable for rake, and while the steering wheel is in approximately the right place, it's at an angle so that the top is too far away to reach. And then there's the pedals, which feel as though they're about a foot too close, forcing the driver to adopt a bent legs position, which makes long journeys a literal pain. Driving a Miura is an assault on the senses. Today, a car capable of 170 miles an hour is relatively easy to find, and when you do find one, you can probably drive it with one hand while listening to the radio. The Miura isn't like that at all, and not just because most of them don't have radios. It's an incredibly intense experience, even compared to other vintage exotic cars. The experience is dominated by the sound, not just of the exhaust, but of gear whine and also carburetors. It is a mechanical wall of sound that overwhelms the occupants with its rawness. It could not be farther away from fake engine noises coming out of speakers. The steering is fairly light, the chassis is composed, and the ride remarkably good. The clutch is progressive and easy to use. It's really the powertrain that demands the most skill and sensitivity. The engine will not tolerate sudden throttle inputs. You must progressively squeeze the pedal to full throttle. If you mat it, the engine gurgles and falters in protest. But if you do it right, you're rewarded with something that sounds like it should be at Le Mans in the 1960s, heightened by the long gearing that makes each run to redline seem to last forever. And then there's the gear change. It requires a strange mixture of gentleness and force. Apply force when leaving a gear and moving the lever. Use a gentle but firm pressure when selecting the next gear as the synchro mesh does its thing. And never try to cut corners when making your way through the H pattern, or you may not find a gear at all. The result of all this is a car that doesn't flatter the driver. Instead, it calls the driver out for anything but the most finessed and attentive operation. Intimidating at first, then rewarding if you ever manage to master it. It's a car that will not let you access its talent unless you demonstrate that you are worthy, and the level of intimacy and involvement with the machine simply doesn't exist in modern cars. Although LJK Setright famously covered 1,000 miles in a Miura for a cover story for Car magazine in 1967, the Miura really isn't suited to this type of use. It's so stimulating, so intense, that to experience it for more than an hour or two is overwhelming. Best to drive purposely for an hour or two and then stop to have a drink, a shower, a cigarette, and a massage all at once. Anyone who is driving one of these cars is a hero. If you ever see someone driving one, thank them. They're suffering, the best kind of suffering, so you, random passerby, can experience one of the most iconic and impactful cars of all time. Driving the Miura highlights that it is very much a product of another era, and that's what makes it so great to experience today. Despite being from another age, its impact is lasting. A spaceship from the future when it arrived, it not only put Lamborghini on the map when the company was just 3 years old, it forced a reaction from Ferrari while also creating the mold for every mid-engined supercar since. This is the granddaddy of them all.